Jarl, mateys. The Jarl Vetreidi Armory deck was announced just 3 days ago, and this is exciting for two very awesome reasons. One, we're getting an unprecedented amount of new Majestics and a new Legendary in the Armory deck. Now, this does make the new Armory deck cost $60 USD, but it's still really sweet because we're getting a completely new hero with new cards and new mechanics, which I'm very excited for. The second reason that this is really awesome is the most obvious. Earth and Ice are back. Everybody rejoice. This is my first stab at what Jarl might look like. Now, this is a way too early deck tech for Jarl because we don't even know what all of the cards are going to be. There's still a bunch of Majestics and a Legendary that haven't been spoiled, and things are going to change a whole bunch as we approach the Armory deck. But here is my take at what you can do with Jarl and how cool he can be. Thanks for stopping by, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. We're going to start this deck tech off right by talking about Jarl himself and what his hero ability actually does. Jarl says whenever you play an ice card, create a frostbite token in an opponent's exposed head, chest, arms, or leg zone, and then it says a zone is exposed if there is nothing in or equipped to it, which means as you're chewing through your opponent's equipment through the game, as long as it's not battle worn, we're going to be able to put frostbites in those spots anytime we play an ice card, which is really awesome, and this gives us a lot of value that we're looking at. The other thing that's really cool about Jarl is that he has essence of earth and ice, which means we can play all of the powerful earth cards that we just got from Rosetta. Looking at our equipment, we're going to start with Crown of Providence. Being able to protect your arsenal, plus filter anytime you have an awkward hand is just too powerful, and I think this generic headpiece is just a great place to start. Fandle's Spring Tunic has been a long time user inside of Guardian heroes. Being able to be played well with Pummel and Command and Conquer, and also just being able to make the 4-for-8 game plan work off of pitching one card is extremely valuable, and I think that playing Tunic is a very good place to start. But if there's a lot of Jarl in the metagame, we may be looking at using Tectonic Plating, as it does have Battle Worn, and it's a little bit easier to play around and not just get blown out to lose equipment with. Next up is Gauntlets of Iron Will. Gauntlets of Iron Will and Crater Fist were both cards I was considering. The buff from Crater's Fist could be very relevant, but I think Gauntlets of Iron Will is just better. Being able to play around reactions and just block efficiently is very relevant in this meta, and if Warrior kind of makes a comeback in a mid-range meta, Gauntlets could be very useful for us. Stalagmite. Everybody's favorite or most hated offhand equipment is back. I'm so glad I did not get rid of mine. Having Stalagmite here is amazing. You're getting 3 block out of an equipment slot that also gives a frostbite when it blocks. When this is used properly, you can absolutely blow your opponent out and get a ton of value here. I'm very excited to see Stalagmite back in the metagame and just being able to be played in general, as it's a very powerful legendary offhand equipment. Titan's Fist is in the list because we don't know what Jarl's weapon is going to be. I don't want to run a Nothos in this slot because we're forced into, we can't play Stalagmite then, and I want to have Stalagmite, probably Rampart as well at some point, but Stalagmite for sure. So looking at this, Titan's Fist is just the best option we have. There's a weird world where we could run Redwood Hammer and try to really lean into some Earth cards, but I think Titan's Fist is just ultimately going to be better until we see what Jarl's weapon's going to be. If you have any ideas or you're speculating on what that could be, let me know in the comments down below. I'd like to hear about it. Next up is Well Grounded. Well Grounded seems like just draft chaff when you first see this card, but the longer that this card's been in play and the more I've seen it used in Florian and Verdance, this card's actually insane. And if we're going to be using cards like Felling of the Crown, Rootbound Carapace, and Plow Under to utilize the Decompose aspect, we might as well be using Well Grounded. It's good into Wizards, and it can help us block against reactions when we need it, so I think that Well Grounded actually serves a better place in this deck than you would ever use for Civic Steps, although Civic Steps is in my maybe board, so there's some conversation to be had there about which could be better. Next up, we're going to look at Command and Conquer. Command and Conquer is like the most generic staple of all time that sees play in almost every deck, even a ton of aggro decks. So Command and Conquer is going to be here. We're going to be playing it. It's good disruption, and it just fits into that Guardian game plan so well. Felling of the Crown. This is just a 3-for-4 on the surface, but what we're looking to have this be is a 3-for-8 that also serves as hand disruption. When you're playing against aggro decks or even mid-range decks, the ability that you get from disruption with Felling of the Crown is insanely powerful. This can be a great card to utilize, and that decompose aspect works really well with Well Grounded and some of the other Earth cards we're going to be playing. I'm very excited to see how Felling of the Crown plays in Jarl. Next up is Mangle. We have to be playing the card Mangle because our new block card just searches our deck for it. Plus, Mangle is Jarl, right? So like it's so on flavor to be playing this card. Mangle's actually going to help us destroy some battle-worn equipment or even some temper equipment if we need to. Mangle is going to be great, and I'm actually very excited to see this card have play. I played it in a very early iteration of Victor, but that was really it. And so to see this being played in Jarl is really cool, and I'm very excited to see how Mangle looks when the deck actually comes out. Your boy's back. Oaken Old is back on the map, and with our new Earth/Ice dual cards, it is easier to fuse Oaken Old than ever. Being able to throw Oaken Old for 9 Dominate and put 2 cards on the bottom of your opponent's deck is insanely powerful. Oaken Old is a very powerful card, only being forced to pitch 1 card. You don't even have to have Tunic. It being 3 cost is absolutely crazy. This is going to be a 3 of and a staple in the Jarl deck, unless we see some absolute bangers come out between now and when the Jarl Armory deck actually gets released. Next up, we have Pummel. What Guardian deck doesn't play Pummel, right? Like, I love Pummel. It's personally one of my favorite cards. It holds a dear place in my heart, to be honest. Pummel's going to be in the deck. It pairs well with Plow Under, and it pairs well with Command and Conquer. You can also pitch 2 blues to throw a Mangle, and then you can float 2 to be representing a Pummel if you have it. So there's a lot of play here, and I think Pummel's going to be an absolutely, it's going to be a staple in the Jarl deck here. Rootbound Carapace. This is going back to Guardians have to block, right? Like, the idea that Guardians are an efficient mid-range deck, we need to be using some defense reactions. Rootbound Carapace is a great place to look. I think the list has 22 Earth cards in the main deck, so we're looking to use Rootbound Carapace to turn on Well Grounded and to turn on the +4 effect on Plow Under and Felling of the Crown. Plus, just being able to block 4 for 0 is very powerful, and Rootbound Carapace looks to get a lot of value throughout this game, or in this deck in general, I mean. Unforgetting Unforgiving. This is one of our new Majestics that we've seen. If you guys have watched my channel enough, you know that I love block cards that block 4 and have text on them. So having this card is really sweet, and I'm very excited to see what this card looks like and how this shapes the deck. This is a Jarl specialization, and it says when this defends, if the attacking hero controls an equipment with a -1 counter, you may search your deck for a Mangle, banish it, then shuffle. You may play it during your next action phase. So Unforgetting Unforgiving is actually just getting us a copy of Mangle to be able to play on the following turn, which is insanely good. Because if you're a Guardian deck, you're throwing powerful attacks, which means you don't even really need attacks like Buckling Blow. Your opponent's going to be blocking throughout the game, and their equipment's going to get counters on it. That's going to give more value to our Mangles the longer the game goes on, which means being able to see Unforgetting and Unforgiving on turns 6 through 10 is extremely powerful. Because you can keep 1 blue, use Tunic, throw the Mangle for 8, and then really force your opponent to decide, do they want to expose their chest, their head, their arms, their legs, or anything else, or do they want to block out? And if you played Guardian enough, you know that when your opponent is blocking, you're winning the game. Next up on the list is Plow Under, oftenly referred to as Command and Compost. This being a 2 for 6, most of the time gets a lot of value. The fact that this card also blocks for 3, Plow Under has a lot of synergy. You can actually arsenal this card and then block 9 on the following turn to then pitch a blue to throw Plow Under using the Decompose mechanic to come in for 6 and clearing your opponent's arsenal, and the symmetrical effect won't hurt you in any way. Being able to play Plow Under from Arsenal is a big benefit, and just having that extra arsenal disruption is going to go a long way and buy us a lot of room. Autumn's Touch. Blue Autumn's Touch. Once banned is absolutely insane to think about. This is just a 3-block Earth card that also does come in if we need it to try and close games out. But this being a 3-block Earth card is great. there aren't many 3-block Earth cards in the game right now. I think that LSS has done a good job not just giving Jarl an insanely good amount of 3 blocks, but Autumn's Touch is just going to be in any list because it pitches to Titan's Fist, it blocks for 3, it pairs well with Decompose, it's going to be an auto include. Next up is Buckle. Looking at Buckle, this is something that we can actually use a Nothos with very well. If we were able to play this, we can get extra equipment slots. It kind of gives us Mangles in a non-attack action. I like to think of this as Mangle with more setup and like less effectiveness, to be honest. But Buckle is very solid because as your opponent's blocking, we're actually able to use Buckle late in the game to clear out equipment slots, which then lets us use Jarl's ability to be able to throw Frostbites in there, making our opponent's turn worse and giving us more value. Blue Buckling Blow, this has some flavor with the idea of what we're up to here with Jarl and trying to get rid of equipment. This being a blue also works very well with Titan's Fist. It blocks 3. It's a popper. There's a lot of talk about like Dromai possibly coming back. So I think just having like this card is like good at blue. I'm not on the red version because I don't think we need it, but this is a solid blue that fits well into our game plan and we can throw when we need to. Channel Lake Frigid. Love it or hate it, it's back. I gotta tell you, I'm pumped. I love Ice. I think Ice is a very positive interaction for the game. It does a lot of very good things for the game, in my opinion, keeps some solid things in check. But Channel Lake Frigid is great. I'm very excited this is back. Being able to pitch a card to be able to play Channel Lake Frigid on your turn, giving your opponent a Frostbite, and taxing them going into their turn is very, I'm going to say Icelander-esque, because the idea that we can give them Frostbites and tax them through the CLF is exactly what Icelander wanted to do. The only difference is we're not doing it at instant speed, and honestly, I think this is for the best. Having to play ice cards to disrupt on our own turn is a great place to be, and I really like this. The Channel Lake Frigid's back in a more positive light. Channel Mount Isen is one of our newer cards, and I gotta say, I love the art on this. I love the art here, like the lightning, like the mountain. It's just so cool. I really like it. This card is a 0 cost, 3 block ice action aura with Go Again. At the start of each hero's turn, they lose life equal to the number of Frostbites in their equipment zones. And then it has Channel Ice. So this is actually interesting because like if you're looking to like try and like play this in a turn and then play Channel Lake Frigid, you actually have like a really cool play where you could give them a Frostbite and then let them lose life. So you have like a late game way to try and close the game out if Titan's Fist isn't getting there fast enough. Channel Mount Isen will actually let us close the game out by giving our opponent Frostbites and just like dealing damage to them, which is really cool. Crumble to Eternity is our another new, is one of our other new Majestics. This is also a Jarl specialization, which I think is pretty cool. If you notice, this is the same art from Unforgiving and Unforgetting, or Unforgetting Unforgiving. I think I got those backwards. But this is the same art, except everything's frozen. I really like this, and I think it's like very like flavorful and on point. But this is really cool. This is also a 3 block, 0 cost. This is Ice and Earth. More split cards mean more fusing with Oaken Old. When this enters the arena, you may put a -1 counter on an equipment, and then at the beginning of your action phase, destroy this, and the next turn, then your next attack this turn gets Dominate. Giving something Dominate on the following turn and being able to put a -1 counter on something is very powerful. If you have one of these early game and you're going to like Arsenal a Mangle, you can actually just set up a crazy powerful play where you can give something Dominate. Also, the idea of being able to put a counter on an equipment and then dominate a Command and Conquer or Felling of the Crown on the following turn is really good. Crumble to Eternity gives us extra ways to be able to search through our deck and try to close out the game later in the game. Next on our list, we have Earth's Embrace. I actually really like Earth's Embrace better than Sigil of Earth. I know that it costs 1, but this gives us an embodiment of Earth at the end of our turn, and we lose it if we haven't banished an Earth card this turn. Being able to pitch a blue to play Earth's Embrace and then play Plow Under lets you have an embodiment of Earth, and if you look, there's quite a few non-attack actions in our deck. This is really cool because it lets us set up for a good value play, but it also fuels our Decompose game plan by getting Earth cards into our graveyard. Polar Blast is next up on the list. This is a card that I'm going to be honest, I'm not really 100% sure we should be playing. I think this one's more cute than anything. A good swap here might be Imposing Visage, like just being able to search for an aura could be very powerful. So that might be a good swap here. But being able to play Polar Blast is cool because you're forcing your opponent, just like in the Bulllander days, to decide if they want to stop Dominate, and it gets to let you draw a card. So this is actually a pretty cool card and it sets up pretty well. Being able to play Polar Blast to draw a card and then throw Plow Under or Command and Conquer is insanely powerful because it offers you disruption and it all works with the 3 cards that you have lined up. Plus, drawing a card off the Polar Blast gives you the arsenal going in the next turn. Pulse of Isenloft, another card that was at one time banned / suspended. This is a defense reaction that gives your Ice, Earth, and Elemental action cards +1 while defending this turn. This is a late game pitch stack, and we're mostly playing Pulse of Isenloft because we want to be able to fuse, and having Ice and Earth cards in the deck is just a massive benefit because Jarl says anytime you play an Ice card, it does not say do it specifically on your turn. So being able to play Pulse of Isenloft on their turn and then giving them a Frostbite in an exposed equipment slot is very powerful. Summer's Fall. This card is specifically in the deck at blue for 2 reasons. It's good against the Illusionist, and it works well with the Decomposed game plan. I was not originally on this card when I was looking at my list and thinking of things I could put in here together, but Summer's Fall is kind of cool because it actually kind of helps us in the Illusionist matchup, and I really like that. I got this tech from Rob at Second Cycle. Big shout out to Rob. He's a good friend and a great content creator. Really like this tech, and I think that the blue 2/4 could go a long way into our game plan. Asunder. Asunder's just been a staple of Guardian decks for a long time. Like just being able to throw a hammer with on hit, discard 2 cards and it gets Dominate to something is very powerful. You can also dominate a Mangle this way later in the game or a Plow Under if you need to. You have a lot of options here with the Asunder and what you can do with things, or I guess you can't dominate because you can't dominate the Plow Under. This is Guardian attacks. But either way, you can dominate Oaken Old or Mangle here. You have a lot of options of things you can do this with. Asunder is going to be a very good card in the deck. Next up is Winter's Bite. This is one of my favorite ice cards that doesn't see play much anymore. Lexi and Icelander really got a lot of value out of this card, but being able to play this in Jarl is awesome because it's taxing your opponent from their hand, and it's also taxing them by giving them a Frostbite in an exposed equipment slot, which gets a lot of value here. Winter's Grasp is really just a 3-block ice card. Now, there is some weird lines where you could throw this 2/4 later in the game to be able to get value off of Jarl's text, but most of the time this is just an ice 3-block card that fits into the elemental side of the deck, so we like having Winter's Grasp as the efficient 3-block here. Alright, lastly, let's talk about our inventory, and then we're going to talk about some of the maybe cards I have that might be in better spots in the deck. First up is Enlightened Strike. This card is mostly for the Illusionist matchup as it gives us Go Again and gives us the utility to try and pressure them and clear the board. Normally, I would have Zealous Belting in this spot, but with all of the attack actions that are 5 or less and all of the non-attack actions in the deck, I think E-Strike fits this role better and gives us utility in the matchups we need it in. Next up is Oasis Respite. I like Oasis Respite as a good defensive option if we decide that we want to have Rampart in the deck or maybe playing cards like Brothers in Arms. But I also like Oasis Respite because it's good into Wizards and it lets us kind of have that buffer and gain life if we need it when we decide that we need to play defense. We also have red Summer's Fall. Summer's Fall is a very good card into Illusionist, and we're playing blue in the main deck because it's an Earth blue and it works with our Decompose game plan, but the reds are in the sideboard for when we need extra help into decks like Enigma or Prism and we're trying to clear the board of their auras. Blizzard. I don't think you can play an ice deck without playing Blizzard in some way. I only have 2 in the sideboard because I think 2 of those and 2 Respites is a good balance. But looking at Blizzard, this card's just very good into aggro decks. It's also very possible that this should maybe be Hypothermia if we're looking at decks that don't have a lot of natural Go Again. But I think Blizzard is a good place to start because it taxes any aggro deck or any deck that's really looking to use Go Again a lot throughout a turn. Arcane Lantern. I don't use Arcane Lantern in many decks. I would normally rather have AB in normal, like in my head, chest, arms, or leg slot. But I think Arcane Lantern works pretty well since we're not running a secondary hammer like a Nothos or anything. Now, again, this is all subject to change depending on what Jarl's weapon actually does. But Arcane Lantern fits very well against Wizards because against Kano and against Verdance, we don't really want Stalagmite. We want Arcane Lantern to have that extra AB to be able to bail us out. Coronet Peak. This was one of my favorite cards during the Icelander days, but Coronet Peak is just great because it blocks too, and it's also like taxing from your opponent's hand. If you don't want to throw Titan's Fist at someone, or maybe you want to pitch an ice card to be able to tax them and keep channel Lake Frigid around, or channel Isen, Mount Isen, I think is what it's called. Coronet Peak is great. Now, admittedly, this might become Balance of Justice or a different legendary, depending on what L we get from the Jarl deck. But right now, I want to play Coronet Peak. Part of me is worried that's just FOMO of missing Coronet Peak, but I think this is a good card and could get a lot of value in this deck. Next, we have Null Rune Gloves, and then we also have Null Rune Hood. We want AB3 for this deck. We're playing like 36 blues in the list, so we want to have AB3 in our deck for the long grindy games against the Wizards. And just Null Rune Hood and Null Rune Gloves are the best spots we have because we also have Well Grounded in the deck, which means I'm not going to be playing Null Rune Boots. I would much rather have something like Null Rune Gloves in this spot when we're looking at our deck here. So we're going to talk about our maybe list here. So looking at our maybe list, first up is Earth Form. Earth Form is a solid 3-for-7 that creates an embodiment of Earth token. There are enough non-attack actions in our deck that we can really get use out of embodiment of Earth. I also like the idea of just using Earth Form because it's a card that people don't want to hit, but sometimes they do let it hit because they're thinking, man, I'd rather block a Spinal Crush or I'd rather block a Command and Conquer or anything like that. So I think Earth Form could have room in the deck, but I don't know where it fits into the deck at the current moment. Next up is Spinal Crush. I gotta tell you, it hurts my heart to be playing a Guardian that doesn't have Spinal Crush in it, and to be honest, it's probably wrong on some level, but looking at Jarl and his ability, I really wanted to be abusing cards like Plow Under, Rootbound Carapace, and Felling of the Crown. All of those cards are very powerful, and it seems silly to not have them in the deck, so we're looking at cutting a card like Spinal Crush so that we can have that Earth like synergy decompose going on so that we can really get value out of those cards. Exposed to the Elements feels like a sideboard card. Maybe we're supposed to have this in over Blizzard. I don't really know where this fits into the sideboard at. Maybe we're supposed to be playing like 2 of more cards in the sideboard and have like a 1 of Exposed in the side. This card seems too good to not be playing, but I'm not sure where it fits in the list at the current time. But I really like the idea of playing a 1 of Exposed to the Elements because of how well it plays with Jarl's ability. We also have Hypothermia in the sideboard. If you're playing against a lot of decks that don't have natural go again or ways that you can use Hypothermia to like try and slow them down a little bit, this could be a great card to add in. But thinking about it like as a like whole metagame idea, I think that Blizzard is just a little bit better, but Hypothermia could be very good depending on what we're looking at and how the metagame shifts around. We talked earlier a little bit about Imposing Visage. This card could be very good because you might just want to go search up Channel Mount Isen and you might want to put it into play. You can also search for Channel Lake Frigid depending on what you're wanting to do here. So I like the idea of playing Imposing Visage, but I'm not exactly sure how it fits into the deck. If I was going to put Imposing Visage in, it would probably be over Polar Blast at the current moment, but Polar Blast offers way too many like positive synergies in my opinion. So having it as a 2 of and an ice card really fills out Jarl's game plan. Civic Steps is up next. Civic Steps is probably just worse than Well Grounded in my opinion. The instant speed ability to play around reactions with Well Grounded and just like blocking efficiently with the decomposed tech seems really good. If you're playing an all ice version of the deck, you're not going to be on Well Grounded. You're going to be on Civic Steps, obviously. And it's very possible that the ability you get from Civic Steps to just block 3 instead of blocking 2 as an instant is better. But I think that Well Grounded is definitely where I want to start since we're on a lot of the Earth and Decompose cards and we're trying to make that synergy work. I also have Spellfray Gloves in here. Since we're running Null Rune Gloves, we might want Spellfray, like it might be Spellfray in a different slot. But we're running AB3 and Well Grounded right now with some respites, so I put Spellfray Gloves in here just as a reminder that Spellfray exists and that these could be cards we could slot into the deck depending on how popular Kano becomes or any specific matchup might be. So it's just something to think about and keep an eye out when you're building Jarl. Please remember, this is a way too early Jarl deck tech. We haven't even seen all of the cards yet. Everything's going to change, and as more info comes out, I'm going to keep you updated on my thoughts. He's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm very excited to see how Jarl looks and where everything ends up. If there's any cards you think I missed or something that you think might be better in the deck, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy, guys.